And welcome back, everyone, to Who Would Win, the week of Who Would Win. And this is not the week of Who Would Wins, Who Would Win. No, this Who Would Win, for this week of Who Would Win, is actually a birthday Who Would Win for Quentin Blake, who asked the question, who would win in a fight, a 2-on-2 fight? Shadow and Sonic from Sonic the Hedgehog universe versus Omni-Man, Nolan Grayson, and Mark Grayson, Invincible. Now, I'm going to get it right out of the way right now. If we're dealing with the Archie universe with these characters, then Sonic and Shadow are going to completely curb stomp Mark and Nolan. There's not even a close. The reason for that is the Archie versions of these characters are characters that are now moving at such immeasurable speeds that they cannot be calculated. Whereas we can calculate their speeds. Not only that, you have the Chaos Emeralds, you have Supersonic, I believe it's Hypersonic, Wish Manipulation, to basically manipulate reality, none of which is something that Mark or Nolan are able to actually resist. Like, reality warpers on that level would just completely annihilate them. Now, with that all being said, let's scale this down a little bit. Let's go more to the video games, which would still have access to things like the Chaos Emeralds, all that, but now their physical stats are now definitely more limited. Shadow and Sonic being, Shadow is not a clone Sonic, he's just an experiment that happens to be a hedgehog. Are still extremely fast moving, definitely at Sonic level speeds. Certainly have durability to take a lot of hits, although they're not. Sonic particularly is not the tankiest of individuals. He is certainly powerful, but he's not someone who could like take a planet blowing up in his face, at least unless he's supersonic. Shadow is the just base-wise stronger between the two of them, honestly. He can move almost as fast as Sonic. He's not quite as fast, but he makes up for that with using his mild base form control of chaos energy to be able to teleport, to be able to slow down time to certain degrees, even create multiples of themselves occasionally. So it's balanced out with these two. What really stands out, obviously, and Shadow's also capable marksman, we know that, but what stands out, obviously, would be them having access to the Chaos Emeralds, turning into Super Sonic and Super Shadow. In those forms, they're nigh invulnerable, though not invulnerable. Capable of flight, capable of chaos control, and which means reality warping. They can do kind of whatever they need to. The only problem is they have a limited amount of time in those forms, unless they're absorbing more rings within the game, which probably would not be the case here. I can't remember what Sonic and Shadow's actual form limitations are in terms of how long they are capable of staying in those forms. I know it's only a couple minutes at most, sometimes not even a minute. Still, in a fight like this, a minute can last forever. Whereas Mark and Nolan are Viltrumites. One is half Viltrumite, one is pure Viltrumite. They are, in essence, I like how Death Battle put it. And what if a Saiyan and a Kryptonian had a baby? That is an apt comparison, actually. They are essentially the Image Universe's version of Kryptonians, more or less. Except they are a warrior race like Saiyans, hence the mix. They live for thousands of years. Their age slows as they get older. They also get stronger as they get older. So it's like, hey, we're getting, here's the starting line, here's the finish line, where's just like they can live for not forever, but thousands upon thousands of years. They are insanely powerful, capable of breaking planets, taking laser cannons that could blow up stars. Their bodies are composed of smart atoms, which allows them to actually adapt to a stronger foe, at least one that's within their grasp to adapt to. For example, if you've got a universe breaker versus these guys are not going to be able to compare to a universe breaker. But still, they can move at supremely high speeds. I don't know if they have like light speed capability travel, at least in fight. But traveling speed-wise, we know they can move at light when they're really booking it. They are very intelligent. They also basically get Zenkais, Saiyan Zenkai. They get stronger from battle. Nolan and Mark particularly are some of the stronger Viltrumites. If we're going by end of the series, Mark, he more or less becomes the strongest Viltrumite there is. Nolan was not the strongest Viltrumite, period. He was still immensely powerful, but he was not the strongest. Nolan also has he's a couple millennia old, I believe. He's got well and truly more combat experience than anyone on this team or anyone on this roster. Mark, though, even if we max him out, is still nowhere near as experienced as Nolan. Both are capable hand-to-hand fighters, though, but they lack certain abilities like the Kryptonians do. They don't have heat vision or anything like that. They can survive in space by holding their breaths. So if these two groups met in a fight, who would win? Well, I imagine it all depends on when we're meeting Mark, too. Because if we're meeting Mark, say, at the end of his life, this fight could go a lot worse in Sonic and Shadow's favor. But if we're saying just going where they are right now in the TV series, Mark is probably powerful and can definitely hurt these guys, but he's not the end-all be-all issue, unlike Omni-Man would be. Strength-wise, Omni-Man's the threat they got to deal with. And unfortunately, even though combat speed-wise, we don't have a good idea of how fast Nolan moves, like in terms of combat speed, like how fast he moves around, like the area, think words here, the battlefield, how fast he moves around the battlefield versus how fast his traveling speed is. Because again, his traveling speed is a very different thing. We saw him light a planet on fire just by moving through the atmosphere. Which means in Sonic's, like in the game, his speed's like in like the Mach 7s or whatever, but that's still like not as fast as Nolan. Like seriously, Nolan literally caused the planet atmosphere. I don't know how fast you'd have to move to do that, but it's certainly faster than like Mach 7. Even if I were to up Sonic like Mach 10, that's still kind of irrelevant. The Sonic doesn't fly, so maybe if he were to move it through the atmosphere at that speed, maybe he'd light the planet up as well. I don't know. Either way, though, speed-wise, surprisingly, Nolan and Mark would be able to keep up with these guys, which would be problematic right from the get because they do not have the durability of someone like their canon counterparts. Or sorry, their Archie counterparts, I should say. Because their Archie counterparts, Sonic can survive moving through a black hole, for example. Shadow obviously would be able to survive something similar. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that these guys. I mean, granted, we've seen black hole feats though in the game, so they probably still have a solid amount of durability. So Omni-Man probably wouldn't even take these guys seriously. He'd probably just think they're a little pests. Then they come in, start moving fast, start hitting them. Not really doing a lot of damage initially. Shadow does again has some level of chaos control in base, so he is able to offset that. But again, these guys are just not able to do any damage to these guys in base. That's what it really comes down to. They just don't have the physicality to do any, or even the power output to do anything to these guys in base. Eventually, this fight's going to get drawn out to the point where the super forms come in. The super forms are where this fight takes a complete 180. Because the super forms are nigh invulnerable, capable of warping reality, especially Shadow is capable of warping reality, freezing time, erasing individuals if they really need to. These guys maxing out their full power are completely the other side of this fight. What's the sentence I want to use here? Are the flip side of this fight, where now Nolan and Mark do not have a good answer to these guys. Their best answer, frankly, is to outlast them if they can. The problem is, in super form, these guys would probably be able to put Nolan and Mark down after a little bit. They'd be able to hit with enough power to actually hurt and damage these guys. Now, Viltrumites can survive a lot, so long as their brain and heart are intact. But, yeah, this is going to be one of those. But now their speed is now moving like far beyond what Nolan and Mark are capable of doing. So it comes down to, would Mark and Nolan be able to outlast the Hedgehogs in their super forms? And because their smart ends are not going to be able to compensate for all the stuff the super forms can do. My answer to that is Mark. If we're going by, like right now, Mark goes down very quickly. But if we're going, say, with Nolan and end of series Mark, which obviously we haven't gotten there. We're nowhere near the end of the series in the animation, but the comics have had another run a while back. If we're going by that, it's possible they have the durability to outlast them. The only catch-22 on that would be they are going to be jacked up by the time the super forms run out. Now, this is all assuming that we don't get some massive reality warp on Shadow's part. Because Shadow's the one who uses that a bit more than Sonic does. Yeah, the question is if we just get some sort of big reality warp on his part. And if that's the case, then neither of these guys are probably surviving. And even if they are surviving, they're going to be too messed up to continue the fight. Assuming that doesn't happen, or they're able to resist or whatever, and we get to the point where the super forms run out, it now comes down to, are Sonic and Shadow capable of taking on Nolan, because Mark would be just down for the count, or not, or again, end of the series Mark, who are still standing, floating, whatever you want to say, wanting to keep the fight going, but are now very, like, they could be missing an arm. They could be outright bleeding out. Like, they could be completely messed up right now. And ultimately, I think at that point, Shadow and Sonic would be able to still take the win. Because even though we've seen Viltrumite fight through a lot, the amount of damage they'd probably be taking from the super forms is enough that even though they could still keep fighting, Sonic and Shadow still can move at the speeds they move, whereas they're limited by physical condition. And like they will not be able to move as fast, take as much damage, throw a big enough strong of a punch because of how physical conditioning works. When you're injured, tired out, all that, you just can't, deal the kind of damage you can, or take the kind of damage, or move as fast. Where Shadow and Sonic might be tired out, but they should still be able to move at relativistic speeds to what they normally move at. So I think it would be a long, drawn-out fight, but I think Sonic and Shadow would probably take it in the end. Now, obviously, this is all opinion. Look, I'll never claim myself to be an expert on anything except maybe Bleach. I'm not ashamed to say that when it comes to Bleach, I'm arguably an expert, but that's my opinion. That's my take. My opinion is I am an expert. I am a genius. But no, legitimately. I'm pretty well. It's like the one media franchise like I know nearly everything. Maybe not like a name off the top of my head, but I know what say like a Zanpakuto does, even though I don't remember the name. I know who the character is, even if I don't quite remember the character. In terms of when I say expert, I know what I'm talking about. I just need to remember. Oh, that's the name. Whereas this is like I know a lot about both, but I'm open to being wrong. And like I said, these guys are still durable and tanky as hell. Whether or not they survive the super forms is simply what this fight comes down to. And like I said for the Sonic fans, if we were to look at a composited version of Sonic and Shadow, or just the Archie version of Sonic and Shadow, well, then Nolan and Mark are screwed. Because now you're talking about guys who can literally affect a universe, a multiverse, all that. I digress, though. That's my thoughts. What do you think? Put in the comments below. Let me know. Till then, thanks for watching. Happy birthday. Happy Thanksgiving. I've got 2 more videos to do today. And plus, I got Moana. I got to go see Moana 2. Well, gotta go. I'm seeing Moana 2 later tonight. So I'll have my out-of-the-theater reaction for that. Till then, thanks for watching. See you later.